Welcome to the 3-day Emotional Intelligence Masterclass, where insight meets impact, and every session promises transformation. Get ready to be equipped, enlightened, and empowered by 3 exceptional minds, professionals who don't just teach emotional intelligence, they embody it. First up, a man whose name echoes across development, human rights, and peace-building landscapes. Dr. Gwar Terngu, with over 30 years of field expertise, has worked with UNDP, UNICEF, and ActionAid, and now leads the Kaduna State Office of the National Human Rights Commission. A visiting scholar, a conflict transformation strategist, and a global fellow, Dr. Terngu is a voice of wisdom and change. Next, a dynamic legal advocate and ADR powerhouse. Laura Bismarck-Muriel, known for her bold leadership, sharp intellect, and calm conflict resolution touch. She's the lead mediator at Fansom Mediation Center, head of ADR training at FOMA ADR, and a shining light in Nigeria's legal mediation and peace-building circles. And finally, the visionary behind Mediation Matters with Gabriel Anovo. Gabriel K. Anovo, a chartered mediator, conflictologist, emotional intelligence coach, and principal partner at Geo & Associates ADR Hub. With a deep passion for justice and empathy-driven communication, Gabriel is bridging gaps in access to peace and dialogue across Nigeria. Together, they bring a fusion of legal brilliance, developmental insight, conflict transformation, and emotional intelligence mastery. Fasten your seatbelts, it's time to connect with your inner power, master your emotions, and unlock your leadership potential. Please make welcome your elite facilitators for this journey of growth and transformation. Dr. Gwar Terngu, Laura Bismarck-Muriel, and Gabriel K. Anovo.
What we did was to bring both partners together and get them talking to themselves. We counsel him and also make him know the relevant laws that guarantee the rights of the women, even at the home level.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to learn from a seasoned expert whose voice and work have shaped peace and human rights in Nigeria and beyond. Dr. Gwar Terngu is a renowned development, communication, and peace-building specialist with over 30 years of impactful experience. He has worked with global partners like UNDP, UNICEF, and ActionAid, designing and leading transformation programs in conflict resolution, human rights protection, and governance. He currently serves as the state coordinator of the National Human Rights Commission in Kaduna and is a visiting scholar at Kaduna State University and Kaduna Polytechnic. A strong advocate against sexual gender-based violence and a mentor to many, he is a trusted leader in conflict transformation and gender justice. With a PhD in development communication and advanced training from South Korea's KOICA Human Rights Program, he is a fellow of the Institute of Global Peace and Conflict Management and a member of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. Get ready for insight, depth, and practical wisdom. Please welcome the transformational peace builder and emotional intelligence expert, Dr. Gwar Terngu.
Oh,
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
fine. Sure, I was saying we had a great time yesterday, and today the second day, and we're building upon the foundation that was laid yesterday. Emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, gender cultural sensitivity, or conflict resolution. Those are the concepts we'll be looking at today. And these are what we refer to as soft skills. They are soft skills. It's kind of noise at the background, please. Okay. I was saying these are soft skills, is what we refer to as soft skills. Hello, you can hear me? Hello?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Okay. And I'm saying these soft skills are in short supply. Several organizations are looking forward to individuals with these skills, and that's what refer to them as soft skills. Skills like emotional intelligence we had yesterday, the ability to resolve conflict in non-violent means. These are skills, that organizations are looking forward to. Gender and cultural sensitivity. These are skills, organizations are looking forward to individuals that have them. And today we shall be looking at, this concept, and the learning objectives for tonight is to understand the concept of empathy, the types, and the benefits. What do we derive to get from being empathetic? Understand the concept of conflict and conflict resolution types, and also learn about empathy in conflict resolution. We're also going to understand what gender is and also cultural sensitivity in terms of resolving conflict. So our learning outcomes tonight will be how do we exhibit empathy by understanding and responding to the emotion of others in various situations. How we can apply emotional intelligence in conflict resolution and relationship building skills. And also how we can utilize gender and cultural sensitivity to resolve conflict, building trust in both personal and professional context. Next slide, please. So, under this session tonight, we'll be looking at, I've decided to break this teaching today into 3 units. Unit 1 is understanding the concept of empathy. Unit 2 is conflict resolution. And then the 3rd unit is gender and cultural sensitivity in conflict resolution. Those will be what we'll be learning tonight. So let's start by looking at this concept of empathy. What is empathy? And also how can we apply empathy in conflict resolutions? So in this unit 1, we shall be looking at the concept of empathy, explain the role of empathy in conflict resolution, identify skills and behavior that demonstrate empathy in personal and group settings. We'll also be looking at barrier to empathy, understand how this impacts on conflict dynamics. We'll also be looking at how to apply empathy-related strategies to real-life conflict scenarios, and also be able to reflect on our personal attitudes and emotional responses that demonstrate empathy. We'll all be looking at this. And the most important thing is, like in the introductory session we had, it is also time for us to also reflect, think deeply. Do we carry some of these values? Do we carry some of these learnings? How are we? It will also help to expose us to see who we really are. And this will also help us in different contexts, in the professional settings, in our homes, in our families, amongst our peers. All of this will come into play. Next slide, please. Empathy. Empathy is about building bridges through understanding. I'm able to put up several, definitions of what empathy is. One of them is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. The ability to understand and also share the feeling of another person. That is what empathy means. your ability to understand what the other person is going through, and also sharing in the feelings of that person. Empathy can also be described as the ability to take on another person's perspective, to understand, to feel, share, and to respond to their experiences. So empathy not is about you. It's about you stepping into the world of another person to share the experiences, to feel how they feel, to understand their perspective. Why are they responding the way they're responding? Why are they angry the way they're being angry? Why are they the way they are? It's about us leaving your comfort zone and stepping into another person's world, to take things or look at things from their own perspective, to understand from their own angle, and share and to also respond to their experiences. That is what empathy means. It could also be looked at as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and experiencing the feeling, thought, and experience of another person. So empathy takes you out of your own comfort environment. It transports you and make it possible for you to step into another person's world and begin to understand from their own perspective, their feelings, their anxiety, their worries, their fears, and then you begin to respond. It is also mean the ability to share someone else's feelings or experience by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation. To be in that person's situation. That is what empathy means. The ability of you, sharing in someone else's feeling and imagining, oh, would I have felt the same way if I were in a similar situation? To understand what other people feel, see things from their own point of view, and imagine yourself in their place. About yourself. It's about you stepping into another person's world, feeling the way they feel, their experiences, and then being able to respond in a way that will give them, a better understanding. Actually, you understood what they're going through and you're sharing in what they're going through. So it is essentially about you putting yourself in someone's position and feeling what they are feeling. This is what we lack in today's world. Empathy is lacking. Empathy is like at home, in the family, at places of work. Empathy is lacking. The ability to get into another person's world, to begin to feel things the way other people feel, it is no longer there. And that is why we say relationships can't stand, conflict everywhere, broken home, broken families, broken relationships, communities, no understanding because of the simple power we don't, empathy is lacking. So empathy with others is essential. Healthy relationships and community is for healthy relationships and community. So, for example, some after they've lost their loved ones, can you envision what they're going through? Someone's, house got lost your loved one, able to respond to what they're going through. Now, as an individual, how would you know? Even ask yourself, when you look at these signs we put forward here, you'll be able to know whether you're an empathic person or not. So if you are wondering whether you're an empathic person, here are some signs that shows that you have that tendency. that tendency. And I want to let us go through and even evaluate ourselves. Are we empathetic? Say you are good at listening to what others have to say. Are you that kind of a person? Are you good at listening to what others have to say? Do people often come to you to tell you about their problems? Do you often think about how other people feel? Do you often feel overwhelmed by a tragic event? Have you ever seen some people going through struggles and challenges and you're overwhelmed by what they're going through? Are you that kind of a person? Do you try to help others who are going through challenges, who are suffering? Are you good at telling when people are not being honest? Do you sometimes feel drained or overwhelmed in social situations?
Amen. I sleep,
So when you look at this point to put out, are you deeply, worried about people? Do you deeply care about people within your community, at your workplace? Do you care what people are going through? These are some of the signs of empathy. These are some of the signs of empathy. And if you look through the signs of empathy, you can be able to ask yourself, do I really belong to this group? Now, let's look at the types of empathy. Empathy comes in different forms, depending on the situation. Some of the different types of empathy you might experience are affective empathy. That is the ability to understand other person's emotions and also respond. Then you have what you call somatic empathy, involves having a physical reaction in response to what people are experiencing. While the first one, affective empathy, has to do with your mental emotions. The second one is also your physical reaction. You see people suffering, how do you react? Apart from the emotional affective empathy, do you also react physically? And then let's look at the difference between empathy and sympathy. The difference between empathy and sympathy. If you look at that, you can see the difference. Empathy, you feel with the person. When it comes to sympathy, you feel for the person. Empathy is also different from sympathy because under empathy, there's also the perspective take. You begin to look at things, from the other person's perspective as well. But under sympathy, you pity the person, you sorrow for the person. Under empathy, you connect with the person emotionally. You connect with them, in their perspective, the way they think. But when it comes to sympathy, you distance yourself. There's no connection. There's no connection. There's no emotional connection. There's no perspective connection. You don't feel with the person. So there's this distance, when it comes to when you are sympathizing with someone. But under empathy, you connect with the person emotionally. And these are the benefits of empathy. The benefit of empathy. It strengthens relationships. Empathy allows you to build social connection with others. By understanding what people are thinking and feeling, you are able to respond to their situations from the depth of your heart because you're connecting with them emotionally, physically, and then you're able to respond. The second benefit of empathy is they help regulate your emotions as well. Empathizing with others, you learn to also regulate your own emotions. Emotional regulation is important in that it allows you to manage what you are feeling, even in times of stress, without becoming overwhelmed. So let's look at, also compel us to help others. That's another benefit of empathy. Compel us to help others because you can only help people you connect with emotionally. You connect with from their own perspective. You feel for them, so you can help them. But if you don't feel for them, you cannot help them. So that is one of the benefits of empathy. It compels us to help. Empathy promote helping behavior. You engage in helpful behaviors. when you feel empathy for others, and other people are also likely to help you when they feel empathy for you. So let's look at this. Empathy fatigue. The tendency for you to be overwhelmed is also there. And so we must also need to be careful. Empathy fatigue, also known as compassion fatigue, refers to the emotional and physical exhaustion you might feel after repeatedly being exposed to stressful or traumatic events. People get overwhelmed. People get overwhelmed. You are in the community, what people are suffering, what people are going through today. The tendency other people get overwhelmed, they get fatigued, it weighs them down. It weighs them down. You see people shedding, fears, people distancing themselves. All of these are signs of people who are weighed down by fatigue, by empathy fatigue, by what they are seeing, what people are going through. So having a great deal of empathy that you can sometimes get overwhelmed, you get burnt out, and even overstimulated from always thinking about what other people are going through. For example, caregivers in hospital, nurses in the hospital, the kind of things you see within the hospital environment, caregivers environment, the tendency you get overwhelmed. And that is why you need to be able to manage your empathy so that you don't get overwhelmed and, burnt out. So what are those factors that influence empathy? Studies have shown that empathy differs in terms of gender differences. Gender differences. Because studies have shown that women are more empathic than men. Women shows empathy. They can connect emotionally. They can connect physically. But for men, because of maybe the society, the cultural tendency, the cultural norms and whatever, it makes it very difficult for men to be empathic. That is the challenge. So gender differences, men and women, respond differently when it comes to showing empathy. And then genetics also. Genetics. At times, if you're born from parents or a family that shows empathy, the tendency could be, I could also grow up, demonstrating empathy. And the other factor is socialization, the environment within which you grew up. If you grew up within a toxic environment where people don't show empathy, the tendency is you can't even, you yourself, you not show empathy. But if you live within a social environment where people treat others with empathy, they feel about others, they share in the perspective of others, they share in the suffering of others, they share in the challenges of others, the tendency you will grow up feeling so because of the social environment, within which you grew up with. So it influences your empathy. So what are the barriers to empathy? Judgment and bias. The tendency to be biased, the tendency to be judgmental, the tendency to start, to stand from your own, stand from your own anger and begin to cast aspersion on what people are going through, what an individual is going through, and even to be biased, begin to take side, begin to be judgmental. No, this is a great barrier. Another one is stress and emotional reactivity, that people don't react emotionally. People don't react no matter what happens. They are as cold as the rock. They're as cold as the rock. They don't react. It's a great barrier to empathy. Another barrier is lack of emotional, intelligence and also training. And that's why this training is also very important, to build up your skills, so that you can begin to demonstrate empathy towards others, empathy within people in your community, share in what people are going through, and being able to respond appropriately. Also, power dynamics. Power dynamics also influences barriers to empathy. The way a woman will respond, a way a man will respond, in between, there are power dynamics, that influences how people respond. Even in terms of social status, the way people respond to show empathy is different, is different. Other, because of their social status, they don't want to associate with some classes of people, no matter what they're going through, because they don't belong, to that social status or to that class. So empathy is not there. And also another is cultural misunderstanding. When you don't share in, culture is very, very important. How people live their lives and how they see the world around them, So the tendency is, because I'm coming from the cultural background, the person I need to be empathic with is not from my culture, maybe it becomes a barrier for me to also share in what they're going through. It also becomes a major challenge for me to feel what they're feeling, to step into their world and begin to see things from the way they are seeing, because of the cultural misunderstanding. Oh, this one, no, it's not in our community, in my village, from where I'm coming from. No, this kind of thing doesn't happen. So you close your mind, you close your intellect, you close your feelings, you shut down your feelings. And when you shut down, you can't be able to step into another person's world and begin to feel the way they are feeling and then be able to respond. Because already, cultural misunderstanding, cultural biases, all of these are barriers. So our takeaway is that empathy is a skill. It transforms conflict into connection. Small emphatic actions can have big impact. So that is about empathy, the types of empathy, the challenges, and also the benefits of empathy. Are there any questions before we move forward? Hello?
We are with you, sir.
Okay.
I think it's
any question? Before we move to the next unit, please.
Your talk is detailed enough.
You said?
The lecture and talk is detailed enough. I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, so we're moving into the second unit of this tonight teaching. I'll be looking at conflict resolution. Conflict resolution. And under this, we'll be looking at exploring the nature and types of conflict, the role of emotional intelligence in conflict resolution, and conflict escalation. We're looking at analyzing conflict scenarios through the lens of emotional intelligence and the strategy for resolving conflict. So what is conflict resolution? Conflict resolution is the process of addressing and resolving dispute or disagreement between parties in a constructive and peaceful manner. It's a non-violent process. It's a non-violent process of resolving conflict. We know that there are violent ways of resolving conflict. But in this context, we're talking about non-violent means of resolving conflict. And that is what conflict resolution means. Resolving conflict in such a way that both parties in a dispute, agree, to the terms of resolution. Mutually bringing parties together to resolve conflict in a non-violent way. So conflict resolution is a skill. It is an essential skill, both in a personal life, in a professional life as well. Since we have this understanding that conflicts are natural as a human being. Conflicts are natural. Conflicts are natural. At home, at workplace, in the community, conflicts are part of who we are. But the ability to resolve those conflicts is what we're looking at. And conflict can be positive, it can be negative. Conflict can be positive, it can also be negative. Now, let's look at the nature and types of conflict. Conflict can arise in various contexts and be categorized into different types. We have what we call interpersonal conflict. Conflict within yourself. Within yourself. These occur between individuals to differences in opinion, values, and interests. That's interpersonal. Sorry, the one I talked about was intrapersonal. This one is interpersonal between one person and another. For example, two co-workers may disagree on how to resolve a matter, on how to resolve a dispute within the office. It could be, yes. Two co-workers in an office could disagree. Okay, this is how it should be done. The other person will say, no, this should be done this way. Conflict is already at play. Conflict is already at play. So, okay, we have intrapersonal conflict. This a kind of conflict involves internal struggles within an individual. The first one was interpersonal conflict. Now, there's what we call intrapersonal. That's conflict within an individual. Interpersonal struggles, which may at times relate to decision making. Do I do this? Do I not do this? Do I do this? Do I not do this? Relating to the decision making, or even personal values. Every day we wake up in the morning, we go through, what do I need to do? Do I take the decision, or do I not take the decision? Do I do this? Do I not do this? We have to weigh a lot of options to do or not to do. These are internal struggles. Nobody sees you. Nobody is with you. These are battles that go on within the mind, and it has to do with decision making, decision taking. What do I do? What should I not do? Every day, these internal struggles goes on within an individual. And this is what we call intrapersonal conflict. And then we have the group conflict, which occurs within a team or group when members have different goals, perspectives, or working styles. If you are working in an organization, you might have come across this kind of, conflict, within a team, within a group, where, we tend to disagree over how things should be done, because we have different goals, we have different perspectives, we have different vision, we have different ambition. This workplace conflict, these are also the conflict that we see always at play. Then we have cultural conflict. These types occur when individuals or groups from different cultural backgrounds have different values, beliefs, or practices. When individuals have different cultural backgrounds, different values, beliefs, or practices. Someone from the southeast, someone from the north, someone from the south, all of them, when they come together, there's bound to be conflict in terms of, okay, this is where I'm coming from. This is where the other person is coming from. Clash of culture. We see all of this coming to play in terms of what? Because of our cultural background, having different values, having different thinking, having different beliefs, and the way we do things. This is what we call cultural conflict. Cultural conflict arising when individuals and groups, come from different backgrounds with their different beliefs, values, practices. This is bound to bring about conflict. So in a multicultural workplace, misunderstanding may arise if employees from different cultures interpret communication styles differently. We should be mindful of this. If you are working on an organization, you see some of this conflict come into play. And then we have what we call value conflict. This happens when individuals or groups have fundamentally different beliefs or values. Different beliefs or values. This may also be tied to what I call clash of cultures, having different beliefs or values. It could be as a result of where we are coming from, our culture, So these are things we need to be sensitive, in places where we work, even when we want to resolve conflict. We need to be sensitive, culturally sensitive, and also sensitive to the values of people within the organization where we work. And then resource conflict arises when parties compete for limited resources, such as money, time, or materials. Arise resource conflict, especially what we're having within the Niger Delta region. Oh, we want to have control over our resources. We want to have control over our resources. These our natural resources. We have to have control over them. So that's why we see conflict within that zone, arising because of, resource. We want to control our resources. We want to have hold over our resources. Parties competing for limited resources. Even we can see, even when we have, some of these protests we have, they are also tied to resource conflict. Resource conflict. The workers are saying, oh, what they are paying us is not enough. We need more money. Our government is saying, no, there are no money to pay. These are the kind of resource conflict, even within organizations. Conflict like this, are bound to arise when workers begin to ask for more pay, increase in what they take home from where they're employed. Then we have the interest-based conflict. This involves differing interests or goals, even if the parties involved are not opposed to each other. Interest-based conflict, people holding on to, okay, this is our interest, this is what we want, and all of this, is bound to generate conflict, interest-based conflict. And these are things we need to be sensitive about in terms of even resolving conflict, managing conflict, and even transforming, conflict in places of work, at home. Even at home, some of these things arises. Conflict, interest-based conflict, resource conflict. The wife demanding for more money. The husband say, no, there's no money. Money is not enough. These are resource conflict or also need to take into consideration. And then we look at all of this. We look at conflict, we look at the role and different types of conflict. We now be asking ourselves, what is the role of emotional intelligence in resolving conflict? In situations like this. So emotions play a significant role in both the escalation and resolution of conflict. Emotion plays a very important role, either to escalate or de-escalate the conflict and then resolve the conflict. How do emotional intelligence, how do emotions play in conflict escalation? For example, intensification of feelings. Strong emotions such as anger, frustration, or fear can amplify conflict. Anger, bitterness, frustration or fear can amplify conflict. We'll look at when we had this is there bad governance, protest. It was about fear. The larger population of Nigerians coming out to say, look, we fear for our life. Our lives are no longer safe. People coming out to protest against the government, that we are not safe. We are not safe. Our lives are not safe. We can't go to our bed, sleep with our eyes closed. These are strong emotions. And what did they do? They amplified the conflict. People came out to protest. And when they came out, what happened? The government also came out. So when one party reacts violently or in anger, it can provoke similar response from the other. was a side of what end product we can make reference as a result of fear and how the masses reacted, and then government came in and we saw what happened. Defensiveness can also escalate conflict. Emotions like insecurity or fear can lead individuals to become defensive, making them less open to dialogue and more likely to react negatively. Insecurity or fear, and these are the kind of things we are seeing in our country today. People living in fear, people feeling insecure, and what are they doing? People are becoming more defensive. No, if government cannot protect us, then let's protect ourselves. We hear people calling for people to take up arms. Let's defend ourselves. And we begin to see this kind of scenario. It makes dialogue, even when you call people, okay, come, let's talk. They're not open to dialogue. They're not open to dialogue. And then what do we see? Maybe the reaction for government may be different. And then we'll see the conflict escalating. Emotions like insecurity or fear can lead individuals to become defensive. Cases of injustice, people mob action, whatever, is because people, government is not responding. So people feel, okay, let me defend myself. That's what we see at times, people reacting angrily in communities, even workplaces, reacting differently because of fear of insecurity, leading people to react so. Another emotional aspect we need to look at is the avoidance. Negative emotions can cause individuals to avoid addressing the conflict altogether, allowing unresolved issues to fester and grow. The reason why we're mentioning these emotions is for us to know, even in terms of sitting at the table to resolve this conflict, what are the emotions at display? Is it a defensive one, which arises out of fear and insecurity? And when we have people thinking negatively, they will tendency is to avoid addressing the conflict altogether and leaving a lot of matters unresolved. These are things we need to look out for. Defensiveness, avoidance, people not wanting the issue to be resolved, walking away from even the table of dialogue. But altogether, calming influence, managing emotion effectively can help this escalate conflict. When one party remains calm, it can influence the other to adopt a similar of complex situation and scenarios. Calming influence can escalate the conflict. It can escalate the conflict. When the one party is remaining, responding in a very calm manner, the tendency is also that the other party will also respond in a calm manner. But when we come into a dialogue sessions, and then everyone is shouting, angry, bitter, the tendency of the other person to may respond angrily, and then will not be able to get the solution we're looking out for. So when the party remains calm, it can influence the other party to adopt a similar response of calmness. So a leader who maintains composure during a dispute can help or create a more rational environment for discussion, reducing hostility. So in every complex scenario, the tendency is to check our emotions, ask ourselves, is our emotions, in my emotion, escalating or de-escalating the situation? Is my emotion fueling the conflict or reducing the conflict? So positive emotion exchanges, such as expression of appreciation or acknowledgement, can strengthen relationships and create a foundation for resolving conflict. Building relationship. Positive emotional exchanges can de-escalate conflict, can de-escalate the conflict. Building will bring about a calm environment, a conducive environment where parties can sit together and be able to resolve their issues mutually, in a very calm and acceptable manner. So we can look at this in terms of family conflict. For example, if disagreement arises between siblings about caring for aging parents, how do you respond? And that's where emotional analysis come into play. And one of them is self-awareness. Self-awareness for both siblings, the ability to be able to identify their personal feelings, perhaps their guilt, their resentment or protectiveness relating to their roles in caregiving. Because argument, complaining, whatever, is not the solution. It's not the solution. But it's for both parties to be able to look at themselves, talk to themselves, ask themselves, in this situation, what do we need to do? What do I need to do? What do the other party needs to do? Instead of allowing the emotion to detect responses, we approach the situation in a very calm manner. We speak calmly to each other. We speak calmly within this context. And we see each of them respond in such a situation, in such a way that it will bring about peace. Like we said, conflict is part of human nature. Conflict is part of human nature, but the ability for us to resolve the conflict is what matters most in building peaceful, conducive, and resilient societies. Talked about cultural conflict. A misunderstanding occurs a multicultural theme due to different communication strategies. Different communication strategies. How do we resolve this? How do we resolve this? How do we address this? A cultural conflict because of different communication styles. How do we resolve this? But then we talked about self-awareness, and that is where self-awareness comes in. Team members should reflect on their own cultural biases and how this may influence their perception of others. Being able to reflect, look at yourself, analyze, ask yourself very sensitive questions. Why are those biases? And how are my biases influencing the perception of the other members of the team? And how can this be addressed? Like I said, we come from different cultural backgrounds. And some of the things we do and the way we react to situations, is also informed largely from where we are coming from. Those cultural, we may not, at times, it may be very subtle and be very difficult for us to even, lay our hand properly on some of these cultural biases, but they are there. They are there. They are there. And in most cases, even influences how we react, to situations and circumstances, within our own environment. Then look at personal relationship conflict. A couple argues over financial decisions. A couple arguing over financial decisions. Arguing. We ask yourself, will argument solve the problem? Is the argument the answer? Of course, no. Argument is not the answer. To start with is self-awareness. Self-awareness. Each party should recognize their feelings about money, such as anxiety, or insecurity, which can impact what their reactions, their feelings about money. You need to be able to sit, analyze, how does this affect affect me? You know, the money we're talking about, the resources, the money we're talking about, how does it affect our family? Because about when you see couples arguing, especially when it comes to financial decisions, at times it's about insecurity, anxiety, either about food, either about shelter, either about clothing, either about health. When a couple, especially for the woman, when she begin to feel insecure, with regards to how monies are being managed, then there's a problem. But argument will not solve the problem. It calls for dialogue, open discussion in a transparent way, so that we know what the anxieties are, what the worries are, and how we can be able to resolve it. So taking time to cool up before discussing finances and what can prevent hurtful exchanges and allow for rational discussion. Taking time off before discussing finances, for couples, you can take time off and then you come back together. Okay, let's talk now. Let's discuss about this money. Some couples are be able to, have, developed, a template for how monies should be managed, from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. And the reason why they do this is to avoid conflict, this argument we're talking about. So religious conflict may also arise. A community divided over the construction of a new place of worship with differing views based on religious beliefs. All of this calls for self-awareness. We see all of this playing out in different communities. New place of worship. There was a time I wanted to do one, and they were telling me, okay, if you want to do this one, there's a prototype, which means you can't go and build even place of worship. There are prototypes, because these people say, okay, this is how they want it to be. If you don't do it the way they want to do it, maybe, there'll be conflict. In a place of worship. Okay, want to build a place of worship. Okay, people may want to raise resentment, based on their beliefs. So all of this calls for self-awareness. Members should recognize their own emotions as relate to this matter, where it is fear of change, of anger at perceiving justice, or pride in their beliefs. All of this comes into play. Self-awareness. You can see this concept of self-awareness occurring at every conflict scenario. The ability for parties to be self-aware of their own emotions, how it relates to that particular issue, is very important for even the resolution, of that matter. Neighborhood dispute. This may also happen, neighbor clash over noise levels from a home renovation project. Self-awareness. Identify their feelings, annoyance, or anxiety. That is what will end the issue. Be able to come together, talk to themselves, analyze what the issue, what their feelings are, their fears and insecurity are, and then being able to make out a workable solution. Okay, for us, this is how we want to do it. This is how this issue can be resolved. Or if you want to do your renovation, please, you can wait until when we are out, and then you can do your renovation, so that the noise levels can be reduced and we can have a peaceful environment. All of this requires, identify our feelings, such as annoyance or anxiety, as it relates to the issue at stake. And then being able to, instead of complaining, communicating to ourselves in a very calm and peaceful way, so that we resolve the matter in very amicable, context, that everyone feel satisfied and everyone, acceptable to the solutions we found ourselves and we devise for ourselves. Also, sport rivalry. It also, yes, tension between fans of rival sport teams leading to conflict during what? Games. All of this can also comes into play. And what do we need to do? Self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness to distill the passion and have it affect, the fans, and being able to work out, modalities for resolving the conflict in such a way that are acceptable to everyone. Managing excitement and aggression during games can prevent confrontation from arising into physical confrontations. Managing excitement and aggression. If you go to youth centers, you go to watch matches there, you know what happened. Supporters of certain clubs, the tendency, acts of excitement. The winning team is so excited, and probably the losing team can be so bitter, angry. And this has the tendency to create conflict, but this can also be managed. Managing excitement and aggression can also prevent, physical confrontation. Also look at family holiday conflict may also arise. These are things that may happen and occur in our families that also need to be conscious of. Conflict at the family level. That's why we're talking about different scenarios of conflict. Conflict at the workplace, cultural conflict, personal conflict. All of these, are very important and things that we see every day. But all of this calls for self-awareness. Now, let's look at emotional intelligence strategies for conflict resolution. Emotional intelligence strategies. We've looked at these different levels of how emotions affect conflict, how emotions can escalate conflict, and also how emotions can also be the solution to peace building. So emotional intelligence plays a very crucial role in conflict resolution by helping individuals manage their emotions, understand the emotions of others, and being able to navigate difficult situations with empathy and self-awareness. Emotional intelligence is very, very important for resolving conflict. It's the cornerstone of conflict resolution. It's the cornerstone, it's the foundation for conflict resolution. Being able to manage your emotions and then being able to see what people are going through, understanding the emotion of others, and being able to see how you can manage all of this, through empathy and also self-awareness. So in what ways can emotional intelligence impact on conflict resolution? Number one, self-awareness. Self-awareness. We've been talking about self-awareness at different conflict scenarios. At different conflict scenarios, we've been talking about emotional awareness. And what does self-awareness mean? What does self-awareness mean? Self-awareness means emotional intelligence enables individuals to recognize their own emotions, understand what triggers them, and acknowledge how this emotion can influence their thoughts and behavior during a conflict. This is very, very important. Being aware of your own emotions, understanding what triggers those emotions, and acknowledge these emotions, and also seeing how you can use them and also influence the thought and behavior during what? Conflict. So by being self-aware, we can better control the emotion of ours and also control the emotion of others in terms of responding and making rational decisions. Being self-aware, individuals can better control what their own emotions, responses, and also make more rational decisions. And that is very, very important even for us, even you as an individual, in terms of knowing, self-aware about your emotions, and then being able to see how you can bring these emotions to bear in terms of influencing responses and making more rational decisions. Self-awareness, understanding your emotions, what triggers your emotions, and acknowledging how these emotions influence your thought and behaviors, even during, terms of conflict. And especially if you are managing a conflict, you're a conflict manager, it's also very important. Not just understand your own emotions also, but also understanding the emotions of parties in the dispute, and what influences those emotions, and also how those emotions can be managed, during conflict. Number 2 is social skills. Social skills. This is how emotional intelligence influences conflict resolution in terms of social skills. Emotional intelligence enhances interpersonal skills, such as communication, active listening, and collaboration, which are essential for resolving conflict. Individuals with strong emotional intelligence can communicate their thoughts and feelings clearly, listen attentively to others, and work together to find mutually acceptable solutions. Emotional intelligence works together with interpersonal skills such as communication, the ability to listen and listen actively, interpersonal skill, the ability to be able to communicate. And people who are emotionally aware, who have the emotional intelligence, are better placed to communicate their thoughts and their feelings clearly. They also listen what attentively to others and work together to find mutually acceptable solutions. If you listen to what we talked about empathy in our earlier definition, we said it includes the ability for you to feel for others, the ability to listen to others, from their own perspective, the ability to go into their own world and share in what they're going through, and then be able to respond. And one of the ways you can be able to respond appropriately is ability to be able to communicate clearly, and also listen attentively to what others are saying. So it's a major skill required for resolving conflict. The ability to communicate openly, intelligently, and also to listen attentively to others, and then work together with them to find mutually acceptable solution. It is not about you. It's about you working with them. And how can you work together with them? Until you are able to listen attentively and be able to communicate and then collaborate. Strong partnership, working with parties in a conflict to find mutually acceptable solutions. And that is what emotional intelligence brings to bear in the context of conflict resolution. Then the other thing is also conflict management. Emotional intelligence equip individuals with skills to manage and resolve conflict productively by understanding the emotions and those of others. Individuals can de-escalate tense situations, facilitate open dialogue, and negotiate solutions that addresses the underlying issues. The ability to understand your emotions, understand the emotions of other parties in a dispute, and then work together with them to facilitate open dialogue, negotiate solutions that addresses the underlying issues. It's very, very important in managing and resolving conflict. If you are not emotionally intelligent, it will be difficult for you to manage your emotions and manage the emotion of others. And that is why we're talking about being emotionally sensitive, emotionally intelligent. Even for you, as a conflict manager, being able to understand your emotions, and then understanding the emotion of others, parties to a conflict, and working with them to de-escalate tense situations and bring about open dialogue, open communication in such a way that parties feel free to express themselves, to talk about the issues, without fear, without coercion, without violence, in an open manner, in an open, transparent way, and then negotiate solutions that addresses the issues at hand. Remember, it is not about it is about the parties in dispute. It's about the parties in dispute. What you are merely doing is to facilitate the process and the procedure. Open dialogue, open communication, negotiations, and then addressing the matter in such a way that the parties to a dispute leave the table happily, shaking hands across the table. At least we'll be able to resolve this matter. That is about conflict management, and that is the role, emotional intelligence brings to bear. Another strategy we look at is constructive, resolving conflict in a constructive manner. Resolving conflict in a constructive manner. Managing and resolving conflict in a constructive manner is essential for maintaining healthy relationships and achieving positive outcomes. Managing conflict in a constructive manner. It's not about biases. It's not about you taking sides. It's about you looking at the whole picture and the entirety of the whole matter, and facilitating a dialogue in such a way, in such a constructive manner, that parties to a dispute are happy and are able to say, look, this is our solutions. This is what we want. This is how we want to resolve the matter in a constructive manner. And we're saying this is very important for maintaining healthy relationships and achieving positive outcome. The reason why most conflict negotiation fails or conflict resolution fails is because at times the tendencies, biases. We talked about some of these biases. These biases will be personal biases, cultural biases. Even when you fail to take into consideration what parties are bringing to bear, the tenants also might have been taking position on the matter. So when you take position, you are biased. The tendency is you may not be able to resolve that matter in a constructive manner. Constructive manner means maintaining what? Engaging parties in such a way that both of them are happy, both of them are expressing themselves in an open dialogue, and at the end, they own the outcome of the terms of settlement. They own the outcome. The outcome is not about, it is about them, the parties to a dispute. And one of the strategies also is to stay calm and listen actively. Stay calm and listen actively. When conflict arises, try to stay calm and compose. Listen actively to the other party's perspective without interrupting. Show empathy and seek to understand their feelings. Seek to understand their feelings. And then communicate clearly and respectfully. Communicate clearly and respectfully. Communicate clearly and respectfully. Express your thoughts and feelings clearly and respectfully to the parties concerned in a dispute. Don't be rude to them. Talk to them respectfully. Respect who they are. Respect who they are. It doesn't matter who you are. respect is very vital in conflict resolution. When you treat people with respect, you get the best out of them. You get the best out of them. The other strategy also that plays very important role in resolving conflicts is focus on common interest. What are the interests? Focus what? On common interest. Look for common ground and shared goals that can serve as a basis for finding a resolution. Look for a common goal. Look for a common goal. What is that thing that binds both parties together? Look for that shared goal and hold on to that goal. And on that basis, you'll be able to find a resolution. Emphasize areas of agreement and work together to find solutions that benefit all parties. Emphasize areas of agreement. Parties may agree and disagree, but what you can do is to hold on to those areas of agreement. What has brought them together? What is binding them together? What is that picture both of them are looking at? Hold that picture and begin to use that picture as a basis to even resolve other areas of contention, And with that, you can be able to find solutions that will be beneficial to all parties involved. Focus on common interest. Focus on common interest. The other strategies also brainstorm solutions, encourage creative thinking, and brainstorm multiple options for resolving conflict. Consider both long-term and short-term solutions that address the needs and interests of all parties. Brainstorm solutions. Conflict resolution is about creative thinking, thinking outside the box, thinking outside the box, thinking outside the box. The reason why parties come probably they're seeking for you to support them to resolve their conflict because they may not be able to arrive at solutions, that's beneficial to both of them. So it is for us to encourage creative thinking and brainstorming several options to resolving conflict. Looking at different options and then bringing them to the table. And these solutions can be short-term, they can also be long-term, to address the needs of all parties concerned, These are the kind of creative thinking and solution you can bring to the table for parties to be able to look at and then agree and then settle for those solutions. To evaluate and select what the best solution, different options, but select the best. Creative thinking and brainstorm of possible multiple options, but look out for the best solution. The best solution. Assess the pros and the cons of each potential solution and collaboratively choose the option that best meet the interests of everyone involved. You have different options, in the process of brainstorming and looking for solution, might be able to come up with different options, but choose the best. Choose the best that meets the interest of everyone involved. The ability to compromise, the ability to give, the ability to make sacrifices. That is what makes conflict resolution interesting. Another strategy is also follow up and provide feedback. Follow up and what? And provide feedback. Check in periodically to assess progress made and ensure that the resolution is working. Provide feedback and make adjustments as the need arises. Follow up is very, very vital. You don't just, provide solutions, choose the best option, and then there's no follow-up. We need to follow and provide feedback. Is it working? Are the solutions working? Is that need for amendment? So appraisal, evaluation, very important for us to be able to get the best, And then seek mediation if necessary. If you're unable to resolve conflict on your own, consider involving neutral third parties such as the mediator or trusted colleague, to help facilitate discussion and resolve the conflict. Seek mediation and also learn from experience. Experience also counts. Experience also count. Experience is very important in all of this. After the conflict resolved, take time to reflect on experience and identify the lessons. What have we learned from this? Could this have been resolved differently? So the other strategy you also need to do is to analyze conflict scenarios through the lens of emotional intelligence. We talked about several of conflict scenarios, but what we need to do to analyze every conflict scenario through the lenses of emotional intelligence, which involve understanding how emotional awareness and regulation can also influence outcomes. We should be able to put all of this, this is emotional analysis, self-awareness. It's very important for us to understand what the issues are and also how it can influence the outcome. Let's look at this scenario, the workplace disagreement. Two team members disagree on what? The direction of a project. Two team members disagree. What do we need to do? What do we need to do? How do I apply emotional intelligence into all of this? How do I apply emotional intelligence in all of this? So this is where emotional intelligence comes to play. The ability to evaluate the situation, do an analysis, analyze the complex scenario through the lens of emotional intelligence, for both teams involved, and then looking at the possible solutions to the issue, and then having both parties to agree that, okay, this is how, this issue can be addressed. There will be disagreement. It's a disagreement. How do you bring parties to agree? How do you bring parties to agree? Is by doing an in-depth emotional analysis. An in-depth emotional analysis. We talked about this. Okay, this is another scenario. Suppose two departments at odds over budget allocation. You can organize a meeting where both sides present their cases by focusing on shared goals and seeking win-win solutions, such as reallocating resources based on priority. You help resolve the conflict constructively. Constructively, bringing parties together. In terms of budget disagreement, and bringing parties together to a round table, to a discussion, to a focus group discussion. It may be so. A round table discussion, by looking at the shared goals and looking at what can we do so that every department, this department or the other department, all parties to this dispute are happy, and everyone, have a sense of belonging, that this matter has been resolved. Not one winner takes all, but it's a win-win for everyone. It's a win-win for everyone. These are the kind of things we need to also to look out for, facilitating open dialogue, open communication sessions, so that both parties can begin to speak their mind, air out their views, their frustration, their anger, their resentment, and then we'll be able to find, lasting solutions. Okay, we'll look at the next one, negotiation for negotiation, techniques for negotiation, compromise, and building consensus in conflict situations. Negotiation, compromise, and building consensus are essential skills. Let's be reminded Like conflict resolution is a win-win. It's a win-win for everyone. It's about compromise. It's about making sacrifices, so that both parties in a dispute, reach a mutual understanding that's beneficial to all of them. So techniques we can use in conflict situations to facilitate negotiation, compromise, and consensus building. We talk about them. Identify common interest. Identify common interest. Focus on identify shared interests and goals that both parties have in common. Emphasize common ground, which can help create a foundation for negotiation and compromise. Parties may come to a dispute table with different interests and needs, but we need to understand what is holding them together. What is that thing that's holding, and begin to focus on that matter, on that issue, on that goal. And then we can use that as a leverage to reach out to and also be able to resolve other contentious needs. And that's when you need to identify what common interest. Separate people from the problem. Separate people from the problem. The tendency at that time we may want to even make the people parties to a dispute part of the problem. But we are saying for us to resolve conflict in a way that is satisfactory to parties, let's separate people from the problem. Take the people out. Take the individuals out, and let's focus on the problem. So when discussing conflict, separate individuals involved from the actual matter on the ground. Separate individuals. Take them out of the picture and focus on the issue, that matters to both parties. And then we'll begin to make progress. On the other one, explore multiple options. We talked about that earlier. Multiple options. Prioritize interest over what? Positions. Instead of focusing on rigid position, consider the underlying interests and needs of both parties. We talked about interests and needs. Interests and needs. These are very, very important. What are the interests of parties? What do they need? What do they want? What are their positions? When parties refuse not to let go on a certain thing, let's begin to what is holding them. Why are they holding strongly to that position? What do they want? And that's what we begin to dig deep, to understand why they're holding on to those interests and refusing to let go. When we understand each other's position, motivations, we can be able to find solutions that address those interests and lead to more mutually beneficial outcomes. So this is very important. Identify the needs and interests of parties in a conflict. When we're able to identify what interests those needs are, it will lead us to having more beneficial outcomes that will be interesting and people hold on to. So the other strategy you may look at is to seek a win-win solution. Seek for a win-win. It's about win-win. It's about making sacrifices. It's not about a winner takes all that we have in our political system. Use objective criteria. Build consensus. Work towards building a consensus by actively involving all parties in the decision-making process. Encourage open communication, collaboration, a spirit of cooperation to reach a shared agreement. It's about parties, coming together to agree, working collaboratively together and say, this is what we want. And this is what we want. Building consensus. And then at the end, we're able to reach, a mutually acceptable settlement, for all. Then document the agreement. Let it be written, let it be documented. Let it be written, let it be documented. The reason for documentation is also to provide a point of reference, that people can make reference to, and people can come back and say, okay, we did this, and this are the agreement. People can make reference. When you make a document, it gives people a sense of belonging, a sense of, ownership also. That look, this is what we agreed upon, and it is to our benefit, and document and also be signed and sealed for parties. Because when you don't sign terms of settlement, it becomes very problematic when issues begin to arise in the future. Okay, building and managing relationships. This is also very important. Build and maintain relationship involves several key elements. You can't build relationship without communication. Open, honest dialogue is essential, for communication. Trust is also very important. Establishing trust takes time, reliable, consistent, to foster a sense of security in relationships. That is one thing we find very, very that's lacking within us today. Trust. And also empathy, understanding and appreciating others' perspective help us strengthen relationships. We talked about technique for effective communication and active listening during conflict resolution is also very, very important. The ability to listen and not just listen, be active listener is very important for building effective resolving conflict. Effective communication and active listening are crucial during conflict resolution. And what are these techniques? Technique for effective communication. Number one, use I statement. Explore instead of saying, you never listen to me. Say, I feel I am unheard. I feel unheard when my ideas hasn't acknowledged. This approach reduces defensiveness and focuses what? On your feeling. Communication, very, very important. We talked about, communicating very clearly, so that parties in a dispute can also understand what you're saying. But when your communication is not clear, it can, become problematic, even in resolving conflict. Maintain a calm tone. Your tone can greatly influence the interaction. Speak calmly and respectfully, even if emotions are high. Avoid blame and accusations. Use neutral language to express your concerns without making the other person feel, bad. Give full attention. Need to do away with distractions and focus on the persons or the parties before you. Also need to show that you are engaged through body language and also eye contact. Reflect back, paraphrase what speaker has said to show understanding and clarity, in terms of enemies communication. Acknowledge what? Feelings. Acknowledge feelings. Recognize the emotion behind the words to show empathy. You can see empathy still coming to play, and validate the other person's feelings. Avoid interruption. Allow the speaker to finish their thought before responding. Interruption can lead to misunderstanding on what increase tension. We talked about negotiation and mediation skills. Those are also very important. Build rapport. We also need to build rapport. We talked about collaboration, partnership, and consensus building. These are also part of the negotiation skills. Establish connection with the party by finding common ground or sharing or shared interests. Talked about staying self-aware. Monitor your emotions throughout the negotiations. Use collaborative language. Very important. Frame your proposal in a way that emphasizes collaboration rather than competition. We are not competing, we're here to collaborate. We are here to find solutions to problems. We are not here to compete. And that is, even in framing your language, it should be language of collaboration, in such a way that even parties in the dispute feel, okay, we are on this together, and not about you. Okay, mediation strategies. Create a safe environment. Ensure that all parties feel comfortable expressing their feelings and opinions. Create what? A safe environment. Create a safe environment. It's very important. Create a safe environment. You can't put men and women in, that safe spaces. We'll come to that. Create an environment that parties feel comfortable and express their feelings and opinions. Set ground rules for respectful communication and encourage everyone to share openly. Set ground rules. Set ground rules. We talk respect for one another. We need to all of them before the mediation or negotiation commences. Set your ground rules, the do's and the don'ts in this negotiation, and then all parties will be able to key into the ground rules. And then it makes your negotiation, your conflict resolution process very easy when you have ground rules that parties agree to. It flows. Facilitate active listening. Encourage parties to listen to each other without interruption. Encourage parties to listen to one another without interruption. Another key strategy is to acknowledge emotions. Acknowledge emotions. Recognize and address the emotion involved in a conflict. Encourage problem solving. Encourage problem solving. Encourage problem solving. Guide parties to collaboratively brainstorm over solution. Brainstorm over solution. Brainstorm about the likely outcome. This is what we want to see. Encourage parties, and that is what they are there to do. You are there as a facilitator to encourage open dialogue, open communication, so that parties can speak freely, communicate freely, and be able to reach a mutual understanding, of the issues and also the solutions that's most acceptable to them. We talked about identify common grounds. Follow up, we talked about that. Follow up strategy. After reaching an agreement, check with both parties to ensure the solution is working. That's what about strategy means. Now, let's look at the last unit for today. It's about gender and cultural sensitivity. Gender and cultural sensitivity are crucial components in effective conflict resolution. Gender and culture ensure that peace-building processes are inclusive, they're respectful, and sustainable. Gender and culture are very, very important component in conflict resolution. Gender has to do with the social, the men and women and what the society has defined for them. The societal rules, community has defined, or the society has defined for men and women. That's what we mean by gender. So the needs of men and women are not the same. The needs of boys and girls are not the same. So we need to be gender sensitive, in conflict resolution. The needs of men and women are not the same. The way women react to conflict or violence are not the same with men. And this varies across cultures. It varies across cultures. That's what we're talking about, gender and cultural sensitivity. Both of them go together and are very, very important in peace building to ensure that the processes we're adopting, they're inclusive, number one, they're respectful. Let's take note of that. And also sustainable. So how can we apply gender sensitivity in conflict resolution? Gender sensitivity involves understanding and addressing the different ways in which conflict affect individuals based on their gender identity, especially the experience of women, girls, and marginalized gender groups. Involves us understanding the different ways in which conflict affect individuals based on their gender identity. The way conflict affect men and women are not the same. We need to understand this. The crisis we're facing today in terms of insecurity, women carry the burden. Women carries the burden. They feel it the more. Women, children, they feel it the more. So our understanding, even resolving conflict, we also need to take note of these dynamics, the power dynamics, the socio-economic dynamics that comes into play in terms of the gender identity, especially the experiences of women and girls and how it affects them. The key point is this. Number one, different impact. Conflict often affect men, women, and non-binary individuals differently. For example, women are disproportionately affected by sexual violence. If you know what is happening within the Northeast, even the Northwest, women are facing a lot in terms of gender-based violence, sexual violence, exploitation, extortion, even on the impact of the burden of conflict itself. So we need to understand how this affects them at the domestic level, at the family level. We need to be mindful and be gender sensitive, how this affects women. And in the organizations where we work, at the professional level, these issues also play out. Gender-based violence at workplaces, where women can get promoted because of certain cultural biases. Number two, inclusive participation. Ensuring women full and equal participation in the peace process leads to more durable and equitable outcomes. Today, a research has discovered that the more women are involved in peace building process, the more sustainable the outcome of that will be. So in a conflict resolution process and procedures, the inclusion of women is very vital for that peace procedures and whatever we're doing to be sustainable and the outcomes equitable. This is supported by UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. It has become a global issue, a global requirement that for peace to be sustainable, women must be involved. Their participation is needed. The other thing we also need to take note of, which I earlier said, power dynamics. Gender sensitivity requires analyzing existing power structures and addressing systemic inequalities that contribute to conflict. We need to be mindful of this, even in the workplaces, at the professional level, at the community level, at the societal level. We need to be aware of power dynamics. Even resolving conflict, where men and women are involved, we need to be, sensitive of this power dynamics. For example, we want to resolve conflict that involves a man and a woman. If you are not careful, you won't get that woman will not get justice. If you put them within the same room and you begin to talk to them, you want to find solutions. At times you discover the woman may not want to even talk, say anything. And that is why we see a lot of sexual and gender-based violence happening, because the power dynamics. We need to be sensitive and so devise an approach that will encourage the inclusion of women. So what is the application? Involving women groups in the mediation and negotiation process. Next slide. Providing safe spaces for women and gender minorities to voice their concern. Addressing gender-based violence in conflict and post-conflict justice mechanism. We talked about several mechanisms we can use to resolve all of this. So addressing gender-based violence in post-conflict and peaceful times, not just in post-conflict justice mechanism alone. Even in peaceful situations, you don't need to be at war. for gender-based violence to happen. Even at homes in the families today, we see a lot of this playing out. So let's go to cultural sensitivity. Cultural sensitivity means being aware of and respecting the value, beliefs, customs, and communication styles of different communities involved in or affected by conflict. You can remember we talked about cultural conflict, and this is what cultural sensitivity means in terms of, in the context of conflict resolution, being aware of and respecting the values, the beliefs, customs, and communication styles of different communities involved in or affected by conflict. So we need to be culturally sensitive, in resolving, managing conflict. So the key point that cultural context matter. Cultural context matter. Solutions must be grounded in cultural norms and tradition of the people affected. You can't impose your own beliefs on other people, especially if you are not within those contexts. So solution of the cultural norms and traditions of the people affected, while also upholding universal human values. Where we are looking at, respecting their norms, their traditions, we must also be mindful of universal human values. We must also be able to uphold that. Alongside that, we must also understand there are some cultural values, some beliefs that are not progressive. They're not progressive. All of this, we need to be sensitive. We need to be sensitive on how we manipulate through those values that people strongly hold on to. I won't let go. I won't let go. I won't let go. It is our culture, it's our tradition. But while we're trying to also respect their values, their beliefs, we must also understand that there are other universal values that applies to us as human beings. And those values cannot be compromised. For example, the respect for the sanctity of life cannot be compromised on the altar of any beliefs or any tradition. The other key point is avoid imposing external values or methods. Imposing external value or methods can undermine trust and legitimacy. You are not there to impose values on anyone. You're just to agree with them. This is how you want it. Yes, we flow. You facilitate the process. But anytime you make effort to impose your own external values or methods, it will undermine the legitimacy and trust. And that's why you need to be culturally sensitive. So what is the application? Using traditional conflict resolution mechanisms such as local conflict, such as local councils, elders, or religious leaders, where appropriate, translating communication and processes into local languages and symbols, understanding cultural taboos and norms when designing intervention. And that is why you cannot do any intervention, any conflict resolution, without understanding the cultural context. The cultural context, which also includes being gender sensitive, of those contexts where you are doing your intervention. So the intersection of gender and culture. Gender and culture often intersect in complex ways, yes. For example, cultural norms may shape gender roles and expectations, which in turn affect how individuals experience and respond to conflict. Cultural norms shape gender roles. Cultural norms define what the role of men and women are, and also affect how people respond or experience conflict. Talked about women, being the carriers of the burdens of conflict, because that is, in most cases, in some places, society has made it to be so. The community has made it to be so. Even in Kaduna, we see a lot of things we see. Women being at the receiving end of some of this conflict. because that is how society has conditioned them. So, balanced approach. Practitioners must avoid cultural relativism that justifies gender discrimination while also avoid imposing foreign gender norms. Gender role differs from culture to culture. They are not the same. They are not the same. Gender norms differ from culture to culture. And so we must be mindful of all of this, while also being careful of imposing foreign gender norms. I remember that times, anytime we go and talked about gender fairness, equity, some places people are not comfortable with some of this. Also, okay, you want to the women to take over the men. That is not so. So there is this bias, this misunderstanding, and mostly some of this misunderstanding arises because of our cultural and religious biases, and these are things we are saying we must be able to do away with. So in conclusion, gender and cultural sensitivity are not optional in conflict resolution. They are essential for building peace. They are essential for building peace. So as practitioners, we must engage with local knowledge and lived experiences to design inclusive and effective responses in conflict resolution responses. We must engage local knowledge and lived experiences to design inclusive and effective conflict resolution strategies. Recognizing the voices and rights of all community members, regardless of gender and cultural background, is fundamental to justice and reconciliation. So these are very sensitive issues that we need to take care of, gender and cultural sensitivity, in designing effective conflict resolution strategy. You must be able to look at all of this, the cultural context, the gender sensitivity, what we're talking about, and also the gender dynamic, the power at play when it involves women and other vulnerable groups. So thank you very much for listening to being with you this evening.